Hi, welcome back to the channel. We're going to keep discussing discovery writing because I thought of something else that might come up for a lot of folks when they start using discovery writing if they haven't really used it before. Um, and again, like I said, doesn't seem to be as many resources out there on this. So if someone is fairly new to writing, just getting started out, and they're looking at uh, tips and strategies on how to write, they're probably seeing a lot on the preparing side, the plotting side, not so much on the discovery side. So I thought of this other few ideas, which is um, character development and, or I guess character history and world building. Is how do those work when doing discovery writing? Because from a plotting standpoint, you want to be prepared for everything. So you want to have your world mapped out. You want to know who all your characters are up front. You want to know the sort of world that they live in, what are the rules. This is especially true for like science fiction and fantasy, where the world is generally very different than the ones we face today. Especially if you're doing like high fantasy, sword and sorcery, almost all science fiction, especially. Well, really, you don't have to go ahead in the future for a few years, and you can start asking questions. 5 years ago, who would have thought that we'd be locking down and talking about COVID passports and wearing masks and all other stuff? So even what we're living through today in 2021 would seem like science fiction to someone in 2011. For instance. So even in that low level, there's this notion of like how much world building do you need to do? How much preparation do you do? From a plotting standpoint, you want as much as you can get. You want to understand the legal system, and of course, if there's a magic system, that's like a whole other, thing. The geography. Do you have a map laid out? Do you know who the rulers are? Do you know who the rebels are? All the different races that might exist in this world, and on and on and on and on, that sort of thing. Um, Similarly, with character history, to a plotter, they want to know almost everything about the character up until the point of page one, meaning that you want to know like who their parents were, where they were raised, what their childhood was like. One time when I was first getting started out, I was looking for any resources that would help me with writing, and someone had like this free resource. Download it here. I forget where else I got. I think some books I've also gotten it too, where it was like, oh, here's a questionnaire to help you work on your character, work on your character, and it was like 6 pages of just questions over every little thing about what you could imagine that you would want to describe about a person. Of course, there's their physical appearance and their gender, if they have a gender, sexuality, who their parents were, who their grandparents were, where they were from, what their favorite color was, when was their birthday, favorite food, best thing that ever happened to them, worst thing ever. All this great long detail on a character, almost to the point of like a whole other kind of world building. And of course, if you have that character, if that's your main character, well, you probably want to do one over your villain and maybe some of your other main characters, the sidekicks and that sort of thing. And God help you if you're doing like a Game of Thrones, different POV chapters, and you need to have all that down for all those characters. It gets kind of crazy after a while. And so if that's what you're used to, or if that's what's out there, so on the flip side with discovery writing, where does world building and character history fit in? And the short answer is they don't. Um, you make it up as you go along, which is kind of strange and scary, but I find also just a lot of fun. That you are discovering the world as your character either discovers it or introduces it. See, that's my thing with like, especially like world building, and also with the character history sort of thing, is like the vast majority of that background has absolutely nothing to do with the story. Has nothing to do with the story. Has nothing to do with the what the reader needs to know. So in the back of your head, like when I wrote like Yarick the Scholar, well, he's a scholar, so I knew he was more intellectual. I knew he wasn't very physical. I don't need to go into great in-depth detail as to why he chooses not to fight. Why he's not a warrior, especially when he comes from the north, which is very sort of Slavic sort of lands. Why isn't he some sort of combat guy? Why didn't he, or does he know any sort? I don't need to go into that because that is not directly impact on the story. It's sort of indirectly. I sort of need to understand it myself, but I don't need a lot of details. I just need to know this is the kind of character that doesn't like, fighting in combat and tries to avoid it as much as, possible. He's solving problems of a more intellectual side, sometimes mystical side. And so that is just naturally where his solution to problems are going to come from. I have a little bit of family history going on with him, but I don't really need to have it all fleshed out because that's kind of a mystery about the character. And so I don't need to tell the readers, and therefore I don't 100% need to know all the details either as the writer. I just need to know enough background, and then I need to know what I need to feed my readers so that way they get the idea of what's going on, they're entertained, they're interested, and they keep wanting to read. Same thing with the world. Yarick the Scholar, which I keep going back to him because he was my first sort of discovery writing project, was that he is a Northman, and I knew that I wanted the North to be very Slavic, or at least his region of the North to be Slavic. So I'm going with that. And then he is in a quote-unquote southern land, which to me was sort of like your sort of generic Conan the Barbarian kind of lands. It's a little more desert-like. It's a lot of corrupt officials, that sort of thing. I have no idea what's going on out there. Anyway, and so I don't need to know what the history of that city is. I don't need to know what's going on 1,000 miles away. I maybe don't even need to know who the ruler is, if they even have a ruler, because Yarick's not going to be interacting with those folks. I just need to know enough of a feeling of these characters, enough of a feeling of these worlds to kind of impart that through there. And then my job as the writer is to pick the right details, pick the right words, and also pick the right time to introduce all that stuff. See, that's one of the reasons why a lot of sci-fi and fantasy authors get in trouble, is they do all this background work on the world or the history or whatever, and they want to use it. And so, by God, the first 3 chapters is nothing but the history of this whole world and stuff. And what doesn't help is that that's basically what Tolkien did. It's why so many people, me included, have trouble getting into Tolkien's, the Lord of the Rings, because I think the first chapter or 2 or so, basically just a history lesson of the world. Now, if you're really into that sort of stuff, and a lot of readers are, then you'll just gobble it up and you'll love it. But everybody I know, even the biggest Tolkien nerds, will say, yeah, you just got to get through the first 3 chapters, and then you'll really get into it, and you'll love it. But because Tolkien did it, probably the modern master of fantasy writing, not my favorite, I'm more of a Robert E. Howard fan, but because he did it, a lot of other people think it's okay for them to do it. And it doesn't really work that way. Most people want to gravitate towards a character. They want to see a character in a setting with a problem. Remember, that was our formula. Character in a setting with a problem. And if your character description takes up chapter 1 and their setting takes up chapter 2, no one's going to read chapter 3 to figure out what their problem is, because they're going to be bored. And so knowing when to slip these little ideas in is much more important. Robert E. Howard would even he would go off on the rails a little bit. He in the middle of an adventure, he would decide to talk about the history of these kinds of ruins or something like that. I think in the Queen of the Black Coast, that's one of the things he did was Conan and Belit land in some new faraway area, and they're going to explore the ruins, and then Robert E. Howard's decided to go off on this little tangent about the history. That's the right time, but I think he went into too much detail. From my memory of it, it was like a few paragraphs, several paragraphs long. I would say like a paragraph, just a little bit of a detail, just kind of hint it. Let the characters discover this stuff, and then tell the readers, and we get to, as the reader, get to explore these ruins through the eyes of Conan and through the eyes of Belit. But part of that was also just the style. That was back in the 1930s, and that was kind of how people wrote back then. It's not as common anymore, and so a lot of people wouldn't appreciate it. So I think discovery writing allows for a much more organic flow of this kind of information, because if you, the writer, let yourself discover these worlds and discover these characters and explore them right along with the readers, then it feels natural, it feels organic, it doesn't feel forced, it doesn't feel like a textbook, it doesn't feel like, oh, this is something the writer spent a month working on, and so he's going to have to describe in great detail how the engines on the starships work or something. And unless that's like a main character, a main plot of the story, it's usually just not that interesting to most people. Think of like folding space, in Dune. That was a big part of the story. If we knew that the Navigator Guild used spice to help them fold space, and through folding space, that was how people traveled from one star system to the next. That was kind of important. We need to know that because that was why spice production was so important, why the spice must flow. Because if that doesn't happen anymore, if that doesn't work anymore, pretty much the galaxy, the civilization of the galaxy as they knew it would just collapse. Think of it as like today is like if someone produced some sort of energy source that just shut down all gasoline function, in on Earth, that'd be a big deal because overnight no one could drive a car, no planes could fly, transportation would grind to a halt. That would throw us back into the Dark Ages sort of thing. And so that kind of information, that flow is good, it's important, but even the way Frank Herbert did it was much more organic, where it was by demonstrating why this was important, why this was necessary. Sometimes it was a character explaining it to another character, but by letting yourself just discover this stuff on your own, as you discover it, you pass it on to the reader, and then the reader gets to discover it at the same time, and then it feels more natural and normal. And the same thing with the characters as well. Readers generally don't need to know, nor are interested in knowing every single little detail about a character. And so it goes down to, why are you spending lots of your time trying to fill out some 6-page character, history sheet, character descriptor sheet or something like that? Because that's not writing. Writing is writing. Writing is putting new words on a page. If you are preparing to write, you are not writing. You're just preparing. I like to think of it this way. It's like preparing to exercise doesn't help you lose weight. Going to the gym and actually lifting some weights or running or doing something else, that's what helps you burn some calories and lose some weight. You can watch all the videos you want on the perfect fitness program, the perfect meal plan, watching videos, reading about it, getting their best running shoes, whatever else it is. None of that helps you lose weight. Exercise is what helps you do that. And the same thing with writing. If you're not sitting down putting new words on a page, you're not really writing. You're just kind of preparing to write. And so that's why discovery writing is, in many ways, can be very much more productive, because you're not spending time on parts of the writing process that don't actually involve writing. And so it can be kind of fun. Like I said, I find it just a lot more interesting, a lot more fun, and a lot more exciting because I'm asking myself these questions. What's this city like? What is this character? What's their personality? How would they dress? And I'm discovering it right then and there and just putting the words on the page as I go. And sort of just through it flows much more organically. But anyway, tell me more about your ideas on world building. How much world building and how much sort of character history do you feel like you need to do? Do you do zero, which is sort of like the Dean Wesley Smith method of he has a character name and a story title and he just goes? Or is it somewhere where you have to have a little bit of an idea of what the character's like? But yeah, if you would put in those comments down below. Next time I think we're going to talk more about the editing process. What happens when you're done with your story that you've now written through discovery writing. Anyway, I will talk to you later. Bye.